Our final lead discussant is Ms. Noelene Nabulivou, who is with DAWN, Development Alternatives with Women for a New Era. It's a beautiful acronym. Noelene is the women's major group, SID's focal point. She is an associate of DAWN and a member of Diverse Voices and Action for Equality in Fiji. Also a founder of the Pacific Feminist SRHR Coalition and a co-founder with SPC, Pacific Youth Council, and a number of others of a major new regional initiative, Pacific Partnerships to Strengthen Gender, Climate Change Response and Sustainable Development. This work brings together high-level government representatives, national women's machineries, civil society, social movements and networks in the Pacific for mapping, discussion and shared strategies. Noelene focuses on the links between gender equality and women's rights, human rights, climate justice, environmental justice and sustainable development. And she has been doing this for almost 30 years, including community-based and wider multilateral work. She is increasingly working across the Pacific, SIDS, the South and global multilateral spaces. And finally, although I don't know how she has time for all of this, Noelene is also on the Asia-Pacific CSO Advisory Group to UN Women, based in and she is based in Suva, Fiji. Noelene, the floor is yours.
Distinguished Chair, the President of ECOSOC, and our moderator, panelists and delegates, major groups, civil society, and our friends from social movements, and especially the town hall participants from APIA. Thanks very much for the opportunity to briefly reflect on the session theme and key questions and build on panelists' remarks. And if I could just quickly do a quick response to the panelists themselves. It's been a really rich discussion, and one of the first things I wanted to really thank the Minister from Cape Verde for your clear articulation on gender equality and women's human rights as being a serious business, and I'd say everybody's business. So that's the first one. Secondly, in terms of your articulation on the management of economic exclusive zones and on care of the oceans, it struck me also to speak on the fact that we need to be very clear that we're not just talking about monetary values that we're putting on our wonderful oceans and lands and our people, but on the cultural, spiritual, social, and indeed commons value. Mr. Kami, thank you so much. And I just wanted to reflect from your presentation that it's not just about doing more work on social, economic, and environmental issues, but of course it is about the interlinkage. And that leads to the second observation on your presentation, which is it's very important for us to articulate, I think, moving forward, which partnerships indeed are the most useful and which are the ones that perhaps are not as useful or which can indeed harm small island and developing states. So moving into my prepared remarks, first just affirming with panelists that the concerns of states with special circumstances, including SIDS, LDCs, landlocked states, and Africa, must of course be strongly and explicitly included in all sustainable development forums, including into the high-level political forum ministerial declaration, and perhaps with specific reference to the upcoming Samoa Pathway Outcome document. Second, in terms of the SIDS outcome document itself, and I was here for the SIDS final PrepCom last week, just to speak about the full range of normative international human rights frameworks, and with specific reference to gender equality and universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, of course, with no qualifications. And this is so critical for SIDS, women and girls, and our communities in order to guard those recent national, regional, and SIDS gender equality advancements that we've seen from some of the more regressive non-SIDS and observer stances that, unfortunately, we also heard last week. Also noting that during a recent high-level meeting, as we said, on gender, climate change, and sustainable development in Nandi, there was great interest shown from SIDS, as here we've heard, to discuss what constitutes relevant, durable, and just partnerships. And we talked about the need for more consistent, transparent, and resource channels for major groups, civil society, and social movements to participate in all SIDS development processes. And we think this is so critical to raise here at the HLPF in this development frame, else the rhetoric on partnerships remain just that. Also, needing clearer calls for better cross-linkages across multilateral negotiations and the high-level political forums so that we can reflect the various sub-regional, regional, and global realities. It's also clear that SIDS must create and sustain enabling conditions for social inclusion, human rights, sustainable peace, environmental sustainability, and gender equality and women's human rights. Because, let's face it, people cannot access their full range of rights where the conditions of democratization, justice, and equality may be shaky or arbitrary. This applies to all states. Moreover, as raised recently by the Writing Finance Initiative and others, how can there can be no justice and sustainable development for SIDS people and others without tackling explicitly the global asymmetries on trade, debt, finance, ODA, and taxation, and including our capacity to generate useful data of such. It's no use tackling such important issues of fisheries, marine conservation, energy, food security, water, and climate change as we all do, but while leaving unchanged the underlying power structures and without adequate policy space for implementation of our needed changes. Instead, we feel that governments must craft a comprehensive high-level political forum that leads international efforts to transform unequal power relationships between multilateral organizations, between TNCs and states, and between more and less developed states, including SIDS. Yes, it's a huge task, but it's essential. That's why we're all here. So I close with an observation that I think is clearly articulated in the draft Samoa Pathway Outcome document. We know that human-induced climate change is changing our world and development prospects in irreversible and complex ways. Loss and damage is happening. Adaptation measures proposed and implemented are nowhere near enough. And if there's a scenario of development as usual, then the future global impact will be of increasingly horrendous scale. This is not a doom and gloom scenario as we heard about this morning. It is a reality for too many of us, including in SIDS, with more to come. And that's why the draft SIDS Third World Conference outcome document makes a clear call for better adaptation, loss and damage measures, and the strongest possible mitigation targets to come out of the Paris Conference of the parties to the UNFCCC in late 2015. Because this is clearly not just the work of the UNFCCC, hence this session and the HLPF themes. One of the key roles of the HLPF, we feel, is to work out how to assist states to radically change development priorities and commitments, to enable ambitious mitigation pledges towards aggregate emission pathways with a chance to hold the increase in global average temperature below 2.2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Because without this, the HLPF will simply not work, because sustainable development is not possible in a climate-distorted world. The timeline is urgent. The scale required is unprecedented. The Third World Conference on SIDS will need to show the way in an ambitious outcome document that's fully reflected through into the HLPF outcome documents and future work and other key human rights and development agreements. Because this is the time for clearest leadership and common vision on how to include all of those left behind, with gender equality, women's human rights, social justice, and an ecosphere approach as absolutely core to all sustainable development. And thank you so much for your time.